All right. Thank you so much, Sophia. It's all yours.
All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to Module 1, Session 2. Today's class is all about the theoretical concepts behind early childhood development, right? So we're going to try and cover almost everything in the module. Whatever doesn't get covered, you are still able to access it via the portal. So without further ado, we go to our first slide, which is the lesson outcomes. All right, so we have the outcomes. It's to describe the principles of child development, connect key theoretical concepts of child development to childcare practice. How do we take something from theory into practice? And then lastly, we say describe what developmentally and culturally appropriate practice means. So at the end of tonight's session, we are supposed to be able to deliver on all three of these outcomes. All right. Our next slide now speaks to us about the introduction of the lesson. So basically, what we're saying in a nutshell here is that we need to understand that there are many factors which contribute towards a child being who they are. What they present within class in front of us is made up of various different factors. And when we understand that, we become unbiased to those factors and we learn to actually use it and harness the best that the child has to offer. We bring out his utmost bestest potential that we possibly can. All right. It's important to note for this lesson that we need to practice at all time unbiasedness. We need to come out of our own shell, of our own inner core beliefs, our own religious beliefs, our own personal preferences, and we need to understand and respect humans and children specifically for who and what they are, regardless of how that is not a part of us. That's a very, very big aspect of tonight's class. All right. So it also says in the last part there that we're going to look at various theories of child development and the roles of caregivers, families, communities, and everybody around the child and how that affects the child's development. All right. So our first theory we're going into is called the attachment theory. So like I said, guys, in the beginning, tonight's lesson is very theoretical, and these theories come from people who study childhood development, who study psychology, who study psychiatry for many, many years, people that came many, many decades before most of us were even born, right? So, for example, the first theory that we have is the attachment theory. This was developed by a very important person in psychology, John Bowlby. And how he started off his studies was that he was interested in delinquent and affectionless children and the effects that hospitalized and institutionalized care had on them. So he perhaps came across these children that were growing up in hospitals, that were growing up in jails, that were growing up in orphanages, and he took an interest in them and why they were behaving differently to children who perhaps were parented, who were mothered, who had primary caregivers that were looking out for them. And this happened after the European War, right? And one of his famous articles that were published was called The Maternal Care and Mental Health. So if you can make a note of that and please go read up about it, it's important for us to understand that many of the children who come into our classrooms do not have, the nuclear family of a loving mother and a father and or two parents and grow up in positive situations and circumstances. We know in many of our cultures in South Africa, the norm has become that the grandmother looks after the child, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because many times we're having pregnant teens and they're not matured enough to mother these children properly, and the grandmother step in. Whatever the case may be, it needs to be a positive attachment that that child has with the primary maternal figure in their lives. All right. So yeah, we're saying these bonds of attachment, positive attachment, appears when it is consistent and positive interactions. And it is also when that is lacking, we are saying that is why we have a result where children feel insecure because of the unpredictability that comes with it, where a lot of children get mocked because they come from unstable homes. They don't know how to make positive decisions. They don't know simple etiquettes, social etiquettes of how to eat and how to address elderly people, for example, which are all things that usually get taught by the mother figure in their lives, the maternal figure in their lives. All right, so that's the attachment theory, a very, very beautiful theory that I think we should all go and Google and look into a little bit more. Our next theory is the bioecological systems theory. And this theory was developed by Yuri Bronfenbrenner. His name is quite a tongue twister. All right. I never got chance to go into this guy very much, but what I did read about him is that he wrote over 300 research papers and 14 books. Okay. And he also achieved a very big title, the title of Jacob Gold Skierman, which is the Professor Emeritus of Human Development at Cornell University. So we can see that these theories were not just made up by people sitting on the stoop drinking tea and skinnering. These were people that were deeply and thoroughly researched and invested in the development of children. All right, so his theory basically speaks about how the different systems around a child affects him. The microsystem, which is those things that are very close to him, the mesosystem, which are the things that are outside of his home. So the microsystem would be things like his siblings and, the environment in his home, things like that. The mesosystem would speak about his neighborhood. Then we go into the exosystem, and that is more about the school, the local government, the parents' workplace. Someone might question and ask, how would a parent's workplace affect the child? If a parent comes from a toxic workplace and he comes home in that bad mood with all that high blood pressure and stress drowning on him, he's not going to smile with that child when he walks into the door. So all of these things do actually affect the child. That is what we call the bioecological systems theory. All right. And in South Africa, we have a very beautiful saying. I'm not sure which of the languages it is that we learned, but it speaks about a saying where we say a person is a person because of other people. Umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabantu. A person is a person of other people. And in English, there's an equivalent to that where we say, no man is an island of his own. Right? So everybody and everything around you affects you, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, it will affect you. And that is basically the bottom line with bioecological systems theory. All right. We jump straight into our third theory. No, not yet. Still a little bit more. Yeah, that's fine. The last part of the bioecological systems theory, we say to meet children's needs, adults or caregivers need to pay attention to all systems of influence, especially family life and society. In last week's lesson, I said we need to take into consideration sensitivities such as religious and cultural norms in the society. You cannot go and teach, for example, in Muslim school and be speaking to the children about Christmas. It holds no significance to them. You cannot be going into a Jewish school and speaking to the children about Ramadan. They don't relate to that. So we need to understand who the audience is of these children that we are teaching, and we need to tap into what is special to them, what is unique to them, and what is appealing to them, what is familiar to them, and use that to grow on the outcomes that we want, which is, effectively to have healthy children who are able to learn. All right. Then our third theory, which is the psychosocial theory. Very famous guy, Erik Erikson, developed this theory. He was a German American child psychoanalyst. And when he passed away, he was actually 91 years old. All right. So that alone tells you guys that this guy lived for a very long time. He observed a lot of people, a lot of children, and that's how he came up with these theories. So his main theory that he came up with was the psychosocial theory, and this theory has 8 stages. All right. And so if we go on to our next slide, it speaks to us about the first stage, which is from birth to 1 year old. And we say in this stage, the child relies very much on the caregiver, and all their needs are met by the primary caregiver. In an ideal world, that is the mother, but we don't live in an ideal world. Sometimes it is a nanny, sometimes it is a granny, sometimes it is a younger sibling, sometimes it is whatever it may be. But that relationship needs to be consistent, and there needs to be a measure of trust in that relationship. How does one develop trust in that relationship? That whenever the child cries, you respond. When the child asks a question, you answer the question. When the child shows an interest, you satisfy that curiosity of the child. All right, we can go on to our next slide. And so we're saying failure to respond to the child in a positive manner without consistency and trustworthiness results in the child having a negative upbringing. A negative upbringing would then result in a child with bad character. All right. A child that probably has learning disabilities because they're insecure all the time. They don't know what's happening. They can't predict what's going to happen next because there wasn't consistency. All right. And then we go on to the next stage, stage 2, and that is from 1 to 3 years old. And we say at this stage, the child starts to learn to be independent, and they start doing things for themselves, such as walking, talking. During this stage, the caregivers have the responsibility to validate and recognize the efforts to avoid the child feeling inadequate. So a lot of children grow up in loving homes, but they maybe don't have parents who are mentally present or who understand this stage here from 1 to 3 years old, where the child needs validation all the time, and they grow up with that, always looking for validation wherever they go. If we have to think back of times when we engage with children between that ages, most often the conversation would revolve around, look how pretty this is, look what I did, look what I made. And your response has to be something positive. Your response has to be something encouraging. Your response has to be something motivating. If you don't do that, you have girls that grow up and they go look for attention in the wrong places. You have boys that grow up and they do weird rebellious stuff because they want validation, they want recognition. On the flip side, and I like to mention this also because I like rubbing wounds in my husband's I like rubbing salt in my husband's wounds. On the flip side, you can also do a lot of damage where you over validate at this stage. And so the child then grows a dependence on that over validation, and he still wants that over validation and over the top dramatic praises for every small little thing. And so I always wash it down by saying, you can't praise a fish for swimming. But with children, we need to be sensitive, obviously. Don't overdo it, but don't underdo it as well, right? It's a very, very fine line that we need to walk with them. Okay. Are there any questions at this stage for those people who just entered? Please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I'm going to read the next slide now, which is stage 3. And after that, I'm going to ask Valencia to read the slide after that, slide number 10. Right, we're on slide number 9 now. Okay, so stage 3, we're still speaking on the same theory here. One second, please, guys. We're busy with Erik Erikson's stages of development. He says there's 8 stages of development. We are now dealing with stage 3, that is from 3 to 6 years old. On this slide, we are saying that children at this age, they're more independent, energetic, while they learn different things and make more developments. They may feel a sense of guilt when they make mistakes. So you will see in your classroom, I swear, it can be one of the most irritating and frustrating things if we don't understand that it's a normal path of development. All right. So you will always hear, especially girls, oh my goodness, our species is something else. All the time they will be complaining. I didn't color in the line. I feel so bad. I this, and boys couldn't give two flips, usually. I don't mean to stereotype, but that's usually what happens. So we must be conscious also of reassuring them all the time that, for example, it's okay to make mistakes. Even if you
Mm.
color out of the line, next time you'll be a little bit more conscious of that, right? Next time you'll try a little bit harder. Okay. And then also, lastly, we say that caregivers have the responsibility of guiding and setting boundaries. They should also appreciate the children's accomplishments. Remember,
Mm.
for us, it's a simple thing to draw an apple and a house. But if you look back, remember how many times you had to draw that house with the sun in the corner and the birds that look like upside down W's flying there until you perfected it, right? So that is where these children are at the moment. Something that seems so trivial to us, something that seems so silly to us, is a big accomplishment for them. And we need to acknowledge that if we want children to love and have a good attitude towards learning. All right. So as I was saying before, I interrupted myself. Sorry about that. If there are any questions, please use the chat feature and post them in the boxy over there. And if you can't type out what you want to say, then you can just use the feature of raising your hand. And as soon as we see that on the screen, we will give you a chance to interrupt and ask your question. All right. So our next, so in Erik Erikson's 8 stages, we stop now on stage 3, which is 3 to 6 years old, because that is where ECD years basically end. You are at liberty, guys, to go and check these out for yourselves. If you want to go and look at furthermore what the other stages are, you're free to do so. The name of that psychoanalyst is Erik Erikson. All right. Valencia, are you ready? Pedro, am I online?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know. Valencia sleeping? What's happening? Okay, there we go. Oh, no. Lerato, are you there, Lerato?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening. Just put the question there on the chat line. Hello.
You typed a question. It is
Yes,
proper
just
to appreciate the child's compliments by means of rewarding the child with something physical, example. Okay, I'm going to answer that question just now. Can you do me a favor quickly, Lerato, and read the slide on the screen for us, please, dear?
okay. Cognitive theory. Cognitive theory. According to Jim Piaget, children broaden and develop their knowledge through their surroundings. For example, objects, people, etc., etc. Children go through various stages before they can have emotional intelligence. And then we have under that stage 1, that is from birth to 2 years. During this stage, children explore and develop through their 5 senses, that is the sense of sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste.
Okay, excellent stuff. Thanks, Lerato. Okay,
You're welcome.
so Jean Piaget, the guy who developed this theory, which is called the cognitive theory, this guy was a big dog, right? He was a professor of psychology, of sociology, of philosophy, of many things. He was a professor, and we know how many years it takes to study to that level. Besides that, Google says he served as a director of the International Bureau of Education in Geneva, and he also taught at the University of Geneva. So we should know from all those accolades that these people were very well versed, educated, and well researched in these theories that they came up with. All right. So the first theory, he speaks about stage 1 is where they learn through their 5 senses. Everything they see, touch, hear, smell, they put it in their mouth. They want to lick it. They want to hear it. They throw it on the floor. They want to see it bounce. That's how they learn in this first stage. Okay. And then when we go to the next stage, you will see that stage is between 2 to 7 years of age. And we say in this stage, they explore with their imagination. They make use of symbols around them to make sense of the world. So they will take a broom and they will imagine that they are riding a horse. And they will take a brick and they will imagine that it's a car. And so on and so forth. You know, they will play with mud and they will imagine that it's chocolate cake. So the imagination of the child is very alive between the second stage of 2 to 7 years of age. Right? Then we go on to our next slide, which is stage number 3, and that is 7 to 11 years old. At this stage, children have developed thoughts, but have not really been able to make out their feelings and their emotions. Okay, so still very confused, figuring out the world, figuring out themselves, what they think about things, whether they like things, whether they don't like things, whether things freak them out. A very, very confusing time for the child. We should try to acknowledge that. I don't usually like working with this age group because even though they are influential, you can have an impact on them, you can influence them. They also very bekag, man. In Afrikaans, we say, they like to answer back and talk back. I don't like that age group. Many other people would prefer that age group in the foundation phase, the junior primary, which is one year, yeah, the whole primary basically, 7 to 11 years old. But the worst of the lot is grade 1 to grade, today's time, grade 1 to grade 4, I think, or grade 5. Yeah, standard 3. After that, standard 4, standard 5, today's time, you'll call that grade 6 and grade 7. They're not so bad because they can actually sit back and realize a lot of things that are making sense now that never made sense to them before. All right, so that's stage 3. We go on to stage 4, and that is 11 years old and up. At this stage, we say they have a mental capacity to solve problems. And it's important for us to allow them to still continue to play, to explore, to experiment with appropriate materials under proper guidance, obviously to stimulate themselves. So they can go swimming, but they still need to be supervised. They can go hiking the mountains, but they shouldn't be going by themselves. They can go to the mall or whatever the case may be, but like we say, due to safety and environmental hazards and dangers, we don't make them go by themselves. All right. Our next slide now, we're going to look at the social cognitive theory that was developed by Albert Bandura. Okay, but before I go with that slide, our next slide is going to be read by Lebu. Lebu, if you don't mind, prepare yourself for that. You're just going to read. You don't have to be a professor. Don't worry. Okay, thank you for responding. I'm just going to read this one quickly, and then the next one is all yours. All right, so we're speaking about the social cognitive theory now, which was developed by Albert Bandura. And he says, kids are more observant and often imitate their surroundings. This may cause them to copy the acts of those around them until they eventually are able to tell what is right and what is wrong. Parents, neighbors, teachers, society at large become role models for these children. Okay, so Albert Bandura, he kept it very limited, very basic. According to him, children learn by what they see, and then they imitate that, and later on they will decide what their feeling is about that. Very, very limited theory, I would think, but there's also significance to it, obviously, because we do see children imitating adults a lot of the time, if not all the time. All right. Then we come to the intelligence theory, according to Howard Gardner. Please go and Google this guy. And his theory, he says that children develop through learning styles, and there are 9 forms of learning. 9, intelligence, basically, right? And that is what Lebu's going to read for us now. On the next slide, please. There we go. Lebu, all over to you.
Okay. Number 1, it's spiritual intelligence. 2, logical, political intelligence, and spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, literature intelligence, naturalist intelligence, nasthetic intelligence, linguistic intelligence. Caregivers need to understand that different children require different methods. They learn best when their differences are considered and acknowledged. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So by now, guys, you would have figured out as you go through these different theories, a lot of them are actually saying the same thing, but in different ways. All right. So when you look at something like spiritual intelligence, if you go back to the guy that spoke about the meso and the exo and the microsystems that's around them, they spoke about the environments. So if that child comes from a very churchly environment, from a very conscious of higher power environments, then that child will then have spiritual intelligence and will be able to have a conversation around that. All right. Logical, mathematical intelligence, spatial, musical, intrapersonal, literature, all of these type of things. If you think about different learning corners, in your environment, kinesthetic, that is basically got to do with touch. A lot of children learn better when they are able to touch the numbers. In the Montessori philosophy, we have something we call the sandpaper letters and the sandpaper numbers. So instead of just forcing a child to write numbers and letters all the time, we have these cutouts of the numbers, and the child is allowed to touch these numbers and touch the roughness on the numbers so that the message can be sent, the signal can be sent to the SIM card inside the brain. It must recap. All right. So a lot of these theories basically say the same things, but how they break it down and how they compartmentalize it, one theory to another theory. All right. But it's interesting and it's important for us to go through all of these theories so that we can get a vast concept, and we can grasp vastly all the different theories that do exist. Some may be appealing to me that you may find completely unrelatable, and some may be appealing to you that I can understand why you would think so. All right. So it's important for us to go through all of these so that we can find some sort of relevance or resonance or relation to where we come from, or where the different children that we will be encountering would be coming from. All right. Whew, that was a lot said. I need a tea break. But nonetheless, we carry on. We're right in the middle of our session, 9:31. Another theory that comes up is the information processing cognitive theory, and this is by George Miller. And he maintains that this has got to do with language and activities and information to memorize and pay attention in their surroundings. Caregivers are responsible for ensuring, excuse the spelling error there, enduring. Sometimes it does feel like we're enduring. Ensuring that they use proper and meaningful information when dealing with children. Okay, so all that this guy's trying to tell us, Mr. Miller, is that don't speak nonsense to the children. If you want your children to be intelligent, speak the truth to them according to their level of understanding. You're not going to go and speak matric words. You're not going to speak professor of psychoanalytical goeters with them. You're going to speak the truth according to that child's level of understanding, according to his age. Are we together? And through this theory, if you do that according to the child's age, as the child grows, you are going to have a top-notch little genius. All right. Then number 6 is the social cultural theory. And you can see that's a mixture of two words. It's the child's social circle and his cultural circle. This one here was developed by Lev Vygotsky. And he's saying the social part is the people around the child that influence the child or have an impact on the child. An example of caregivers, the parents, the belief systems, the cultures. And then we say adults influence children by offering support and is helpful in life. Language is a vital skill for communication. Through language, children get to learn and solve problems, right? So communication. That theory over there, why are you not changing the screen? Pedro, are you alive? Social cultural. There we go. Okay. So this is Lev Vygotsky social cultural. We're saying here it's a mixture of two things. The social world of that child, that is all the people that is involved in the child, and the cultural part of the child, whether it is the tribe that he comes from, whether it is the language that gets spoken around him, whether it is the practices of the people that he is living amongst the community, the society, all of those type of things. Lev Vygotsky says this is basically what makes or breaks a child. Right. Then 7, we speak about maturational theory. And this was developed by Arnold Chazelle. He says that children, despite growing in a predictable manner, example, they crawl before they walk before they run before they sprint or fly, etc. But anyway, he's saying that they, even though it's predictable, they develop at their own pace. And this is why we don't make parents and children feel bad. If a child is not yet walking at the age of 1, we go, woo, you must take him to the Sankoma. No, go and look at your theories of child development, physical child development. There are certain milestones and red flags. 1-year-old is not a red flag for not walking yet. Are we together? Right? We have children that walk from as young as 8 months old. And you have children that's only going to walk at 18 months old. Right? If they hit a milestone where the child should have now walked by the age of 18 months, the child is not walking yet, you ask the parent, please take the child for a checkup. I'm concerned because he's not even crawling yet. By now he should have been crawling. I don't want you to be concerned, but maybe there's a little bit of a muscular dystrophy or for it's whatever it is. Go research a little bit, but don't speak on things that we don't know. We never ever do that. We are not pediatricians, we are not doctors, we are not sangomas, we are not any of those type of things. We basically know what the milestones are for physical development. We go and we check it again before we have these conversations with parents, because we don't want them to go into a panic. We don't want them to put undue pressure on these little children. Everybody grows at their and develops at their own pace. Okay, we can go on to our next slide. That's the humanistic theory. Abraham Maslow, one of the top dogs in psychology. If you get the chance, please make a note of it. There is a concept called the hierarchy of Maslow's basic needs. Something beautiful for us to know as people who are working in development, human development, childhood development. All right. And what Maslow basically is saying here is that if basic needs are not met to their full capacity, children are not going to develop to their full potential. And Carl Roger also shares the humanistic theory, and he says that children who receive love are most likely to have a good self-esteem and a positive outlook on life. So the opposite of that obviously would be, if you don't receive love, you'll have low self-esteem and you'll have a very negative outlook on life. And sometimes it could be that you did receive love, but it wasn't consistent and it wasn't from the same person all the time. So there wasn't a reassurance, predictability, and stability in your life. And that's how people grow up with problems, and we all wonder why. Okay. And then number 9 is the transactional theory. I think it's our last theory for tonight. And this one was developed by Arnold Samaroff. And he says basically that the child's development is affected by certain behaviors, social expectations, traditions, and religion. And it impacts their outlook on life. Okay. And then he mentioned some of the factors that can damage the child's development: abuse, neglect, exploitation, malnutrition, etc., etc. All right. Okay, Our next slide now, we look a little bit into brain development. Let's see who's online so I can get some water, can read for us. Shumi, welcome to the class, Shumi.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. And you?
I'm okay, thank you. Would you be so kind to read brain development for us, please?
Okay, not a problem. Okay, so it reads, it is shaped by biological makeup, nutrition, healthcare, and daily body movement. Positive relationships allow for children's brain to learn new skills, for example, smiling, listening, talking, writing, and so on. So factors to consider when developing cultural appropriate experience for young children.
You can carry on with the next slide too, please.
Okay. So point 1 says the age of the child. So if you have enough, the age of the child, it says if you have enough knowledge, whether the lesson plans are appropriate for children, for example, language. And 2, individual characteristics of the child. Do you have enough knowledge of their strengths and interests? Does the lesson plan or activities consider everyone's unique traits? Caregivers should note that children are different, therefore won't have the same interests. They should also have extended plans for children who require special attention. And 3, cultural factors of the child. Do they have enough knowledge of their values, traditions? Did they prepare appropriate activities to accommodate everyone's culture or values? Caregivers should recognize that children are raised various social instructions and communities.
Okay, excellent. Excellent, right, guys? So I think Shumi read very plain and simple for us to understand what they are saying here. Basically, it's what we've been saying in the beginning and right through our lessons. We need to be aware of cultural, social, and other differences among the children who even can come from the same community. You understand? You have a community like El Dorado Park, for example, where I grew up, and we had Muslim people, and we had Christian people, and we had Black people, and we had Hindu people, and we had everybody. I never saw white people, but yeah, that's a discussion for another day. Um, Uh, yeah, so within one community, you can find various subdivisions of different little subcultures and communities going on in there, right? While some children are going to madrasa in the afternoon, other children are going to Bible class or youth on a weekend, and we need to teach our children to respect these differences between our different religions, our different cultures, our different skin colors and hair tones and whatever affiliations it is that we have. And when we expose children to this, that is when they grow a tolerance or a respect for differences. When we isolate them, that is when they see differences as scary, as frightful, and that's when they have negative, racist, and biased reactions to different people, different situations, and different circumstances. So what we ideally is that if we want a child's brain to develop to its optimal levels, we need to expose these children to different societies, the different cultures, the different interests that are around them, so that they can learn to process whatever it is they are seeing, make sense of it, and able to retain that information. Just as we, as the caregiver, the adult, the ECD practitioner, is supposed to be able to adapt our lessons to suit these different people in our classrooms. All right. We can go on to our next slide. So this one here, we're basically just speaking about stuff that can hinder, could hinder development in children, and it could be stuff like mental or physical disabilities, HIV/AIDS, and that is not said in a discriminatory manner. If children are perhaps on antiretroviral drugs, we should know that some of these medications can tend to make children very sleepy. We should then work out administration plan with the parent or with the caregiver to say, we're going to be following these times for giving medication now, so that when the child comes to school in the morning, I can have the child at his peak levels of focus and attention and all of those type of things. All right. Just as an example, caregivers can develop themselves through training all the time. We need to be up skilling ourselves. I spoke about this in Module 1's podcast as well. And I said that the South African systems have developed themselves so much so that in each SETA, in each sector, we are now requiring people to build up credits throughout the year that would indicate to us that they are constantly refreshing themselves with new information in their field of speciality. So as an ECD practitioner, we need to be online all the time, looking on new classes that they have for sensory processing or for development and factors. How coronavirus that happened 2 years ago are still affecting children in the ECD sector today because of medication or because of the immunity boosts and shots and stuff that they had to take, and how it could possibly be related to things that you are experiencing in your class, right? So there's a certain amount of CPD points, we call it continuous professional development points, that you're supposed to be registering. In the case of educators, you're supposed to be registering with SACE, the South African Council of Educators. You're supposed to be registering these points every time you do a course finish, an accredited course, obviously a SACE accredited course, so that you build credibility, so that you build relevance in your field, and you stay current and you stay fresh with the new trends and the ever-changing rules, laws, regulations, and information that comes into our sector. You cannot come here with a qualification that you got 15, 20 years ago. Would you like an uncle to operate on you that last was in university 20 years ago and have no idea what is happening in today's medical terms and all the new developments that are there? I don't think so. All right. So in the same way, you're studying now. In another 2-3 years, when you're done, you need to constantly be upgrading, upskilling yourselves. All right. So the next part of the slide, let me see, where's our time? 15 minutes. Okay. The next part of our slide speaks a little bit about the differences in development between infants and toddlers. So remember, infants are babies before the age of 1 month old. All right. So we can see here that they learn through attachment. They are always tied to the chest and the kangaroo love and the mother's hip and the mother's alles, and they learn through their senses. Those small babies, when they just come, they can't see anything, but they learn to look and to search for the nipple, for the breast, so that they can feed. It's instinctive, right? Senses are instinctive. All right. They use reflexes to communicate. So he can't say, please, I need my nappy to be changed. My bum is burning. He just screams, and you know, something is wrong here. Grasping, they learn the various voices around them. They actually recognize and respond to that at a certain point. And then we are also encouraging in the last part for caregivers to talk to them. If they cry, respond to their cry, pick them up, let them hear your voice, create different sounds with that little thingy there that blows in the wind and makes like chimey noises and stuff like that. All right, we're not going to go through all of the slides. I'm just going to quickly put the next slide on, slide 22. We're just looking a little bit at how children learn between 1 and 4 months old. Okay, so I think there's just a small mistake there. It says they can also name their body parts. Now they can't do that at 1 to 4 months old. Okay. Okay, maybe they mean the care. Okay, yeah, that's right. The caregivers can point out to their body parts and name them. or just talk to them. All right. And then we do learning at 4 to 10 months old. The cute part of this one is where they can realize that they can move objects around. And first it will come as a shock because they would just out of reflex knock something, and then they would try to recreate that again. All right. And then our next slide speaks about 10 months to 1 year old. We'll pick one thing to comment on there. Allow children to observe the environment and to engage with those around them, because at this point they are basically sitting up already, so they can engage with people around them. And then 1 to 2 years old, this is where the toddlerhood starts. They begin to communicate with words. And there's always a fight. You'll see it on TikTok, you'll see it on Facebook, Instagram. I don't know if they still use those platforms, but anyway, you always see the fight where the child is saying, Mama, no, 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 say Papa, say Mama, say, and the child always says the one that you don't want them to say. Yeah, that's that stage. All right, we can go on to our next slide. 2 to 3 years old. This is my favorite year, 2 to 3 years old. In the Montessori philosophy also, we say around about 18 months to 24 months, that is 1.5 to 2 years old, there's something called an explosion into language. This is where the children go from saying little words and phrases to full on paragraphs and essays, right? It's a beautiful stage in ECD world. I love this, teaching this group here specifically 2 to 3 years old. And then 3 to 5 years old, there we have the question that Lirato asked earlier about the reward system. So according to some philosophies, they say develop a reward system. For those who don't know, I'm a diehard Montessorian. We don't believe in reward system. We say in the Montessori philosophy, developed by Dr. Maria Montessori, we say that if you're going to keep on rewarding people, they're going to keep on expecting a reward whenever they accomplish something. The sense of accomplishment alone must become the person's reward. All right. You can do simple gestures by putting a star in the book, maybe, for example, by saying well done, but not necessarily giving them a lollipop, because first of all, that's unhealthy. All right. And second of all, they always going to expect something, and you are setting them up for disappointment tomorrow when they go to work and they do their job nicely and their boss doesn't give them a box of Ferrero chocolates because they did their job properly. They're always going to expect something in return. So at the end of the day, it's up to you as a teacher to decide what type of reward system you're going to use. I say take the middle line, simple things like gold stars, simple things like a stamp, whatever, should do the work just as good, or if not even better than lollipops and chocolates and all of those type of things. So it ultimately, Lirato, depends on what the reward would be, I think. I hope that answers your question. You can just let me know in the chat box. Okay, we can, yeah. And that is the end of our show. Yay! And we did it with 10 minutes to go still. Well done, team. Well done, guys. Okay. So I'm gonna open the floor now for any questions.
I see Lerato Gumbo had a question. He posted in the chat box.
Yeah, I just answered that one now.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. Lerato, well understood. Awesome. Awesome. Anybody else? You can unmute yourself. We have a little time. If there's anything you want to ask or discuss, please feel free. I do apologize if I was rushing through it. It's just that it was 24 slides and I didn't want on anything. Again, I just want to remind everybody that this recording is going to be available on the portal where you are allowed to pause. You can take screenshots, you can take photos if you want to retain the information. Or you can just download the recording, because I'm an audio learner. I download all recordings and I listen to it when I'm cooking. I listen to it when I'm driving. I listen to it when I'm having a bad day and I have ruminating demons in my head. It distracts me and I learn something at the same time, you know? So that's just an extra tip for those of you who to retain all this information. Please do it through audio learning. Go to the gym while you're running on the treadmill. I know my voice is not the best, but I promise you it will help you in the long run. And that's all from me. I see there's no questions. Thank you, everybody who participated and those who were silent also. Maybe next time. Thank you, Pedro. I'm out. Good night.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sophia. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.